Hello and welcome to another episode of Death by Bunjie. This is being recorded on January 1st, 2025. The reason I tell you that is because we're beginning a new year. Yes, Happy New Year's, but also new crossbows, right? This is new crossbow season. And every year I look at all the new offerings online. These aren't really hands-on reviews or anything like that, but it is fun to look at the new stuff that comes out. We're going to start with TenPoint. They announced new stuff this week, and we are going to begin by looking at their Facebook page. I brought up their Facebook page, and we will start going through this. The lead one here, we have the TX. That looks like the TX28 right up there, and that 28 stands for 28 inches in length, I believe. In fact, we scroll down a little bit, and kaboom, ultra compact at 28 inches short. Remember, just last year or the year before, we started seeing these crossbow companies. Instead of how long their crossbows are, they're referring to how short their crossbows are. I think that's kind of cool. And they are, in fact, getting not very wide either, 6.5 inches narrow. So they're not 6.5 inches wide anymore. They're 6.5 inches narrow. Now, we have to put all this stuff in perspective, right? Two things I want to mention. The 6.5 inches, that's probably still measuring axle to axle. That's not really the true width. What I'm most interested in as a crossbow hunter is going to be the overall width of that crossbow when it is fired and how big it gets. So it's really more like probably 10 inches or something, which is incredible, right? Hanging on the wall here in the trophy room in the Kingdom of Bunjie, we have the original Bunjie, right? And that crossbow, 36 inches wide, uncocked. So that's what I started crossbow hunting with 15 years ago. And now we've got this world of crossbows that are 28 inches long and 6.5 inches wide, cocked, axle to axle. It's a whole different world of crossbows. Second thing I want to mention on that, we've talked about this in these reviews, and this is the time of the year where I like to bring that up again, which is smaller, faster, lighter, denser, cheaper. Boom, right? That's good stuff. A book I read years ago, now it's going back several years that I read that book and started talking about it in the context of crossbows. But what that means is as technology improves, we get things that are smaller, faster, lighter, denser, and cheaper. We get faster crossbows. We get smaller crossbows. We do get cheaper crossbows. Now, I know what you're going to say, though. TenPoint's we're looking at expensive stuff, top of the line stuff. This is the most expensive company pretty much, right? So we're going to get a little sticker shock with the prices of these things. Remember years ago when I started doing these reviews and I looked at TenPoint for the first time, remember how shocked I was? Surface area, and that's what's reducing the string wear, I'm betting. Here we do have that stirrup out front. That's pretty nice, so we don't have to worry too much about that, I don't think. I don't think that's gonna be a problem. Holy cow! Oh! $3,649.99. If I were on The Price is Right, I would have been the lowest bidder, I am sure. That takes the cake. Good times, right? Now, not quite as shocked by these prices, right? But I will tell you, they're out of my league. I'm not going to spend TenPoint money on a crossbow. Not going to do it. But when we talk about smaller, faster, lighter, denser, cheaper in the context of technological improvements, we do see over time those prices come down. Today, you can buy a $400 crossbow that shoots 400 feet per second, right? Like the 400 feet per second mark is attainable for all of us in this day and age. You can go to Walmart and buy one that shoots 400 feet per second. Years ago, that wasn't the case. You had to spend lots and lots of money to get a 400 feet per second crossbow. When Raven first came out, all their crossbows are shooting around 400 feet per second. Everybody's like, holy cow, it's great, but it's real expensive. That's not the case anymore. Pretty much all the different companies offer something in that 400 feet per second range. So over time, this technology becomes accessible to all of us, and we'll see that with some of this TenPoint technology as well. Here, we're shooting 410 feet per second, according to this Facebook post. I confess I have not looked at these in detail yet, so bear with me. Bear with me, I haven't looked at them in detail yet. We're both learning about this together, right? This just came out the day before yesterday. It was announced, I think, and I sort of briefly looked at it and saw that they had posted on their Facebook page. So we'll look at them here and see what we got. Let's look at this. We have twin riser technology, zero track barrel, and guide lock arrow rest system, Trigger Tech trigger, cool, and the AccuSlide Max silent cocking and safe decocking. I do like the TenPoint, what little experience I have with their cranks, I do like their crank systems. Look at this crossbow, pretty cool. Now, when we talk about the dual riser, this is the TX28, so it's gonna be 28 inches from the butt stock to the end of the riser, I'm thinking is what they're saying. Compact cutting edge technology at its best price ever. That's cool. 410 feet per second, like we said, so it's right in the mix of modern crossbows. The width is 6.5 inches and the length is 28 inches again. The 410 feet per second, cool thing about TenPoint, I'm betting they get this with a 400 grain arrow. You old friends of Bunjie, you know what we're doing here. We're going to calculators, and you know what we're doing. We're going to calculator for every purpose. And this, if you're new to Death by Bunjie, is a very powerful tool that I did with friend of Bunjie, Gary. There's one of my hunting buddies. Went to Manitoba with him in the spring. Gary and I go way back, and we put together, mostly he put together these calculators. So we're going to click on that to visit those calculators. They are actually housed on his website. But we can go to Arrow, Kinetic Energy, and Momentum Calculator. If we type in 410 feet per second with what we expect to be a 400, not 4,000, 400 grain arrow, we will calculate the kinetic energy in the P. What is a P? It's momentum, right? I just call it momentum. So I don't get into all the scientific stuff. But we have 149 foot-pounds of kinetic energy at launch and 0.728 slugs of momentum. Kaboom. That is the envy of the archery world. People asked me this before, like, how did you arrive at that determination that that is somehow the envy of the archery world? It's very easy. It's very simple. Read up on Dr. Ed Ashby, right? The heavy arrow guys. Really what they're shooting for is that 0.7 mark with older and what I consider lesser forms of archery equipment, the compound bows and the traditional bows and all that. So they use heavier and heavier arrows because there's limits on the speed that they can attain. However, momentum is half speed and half weight. So you can stay in the mix with a 400, 450 grain arrow and have tremendous momentum in the 0.7s, right? If you do that, you can do it because of the speed. You're shooting 400 feet per second or so. This is that rule of 400 that I wrote about in my book, The Death by Bunjie Crossbow Method. I talk about the rule of 400, where if you got 400 feet per second, 400 grain arrow, something in that mix, you're shooting in the 0.7s, and that is all the momentum you're going to need to kill North American big game. And it opens up a whole new world of crossbow hunting because with that speed, you don't have to worry about deer ducking the string out to 35 yards, right? Like I've been doing here, like I've been talking about. All of a sudden, we're not worried about those bad shots. We're reducing the likelihood, the chances of those bad shots because we have a faster arrow that shoots flatter and gets there quicker before the deer can move, right? That plus the fact that we've got that much momentum, that much kinetic energy at impact, we've upped those numbers, and that opens up new doors for broadheads that we can use. Pretty much you can use any broadhead that you want, and on a proper shot, you're going to get a pass through. You don't have to worry about deer running off with your arrow anymore. That's not a thing for modern crossbow hunters. So if you stay in this mix, you're doing really good. Back to our TenPoint, I love the fact that we're getting that with that 400 grain arrow. If that is incorrect, let me know. But that's TenPoint's history. They don't whittle down arrow weights a little bit like some of the manufacturers do. They give you these numbers that aren't real numbers. Let's face it, they aren't real numbers. Next picture, we're going to look at it. Kaboom. Here we've got a guy rattling some big old antlers. Big old antlers. They look pretty big, and he's got the crossbow hanging there. That is a pretty small crossbow. A compact footprint, twin riser technology. Now, what's interesting about that, I like this idea. I really do. What they're doing here, you see riser number 1 and riser number 2, right? So we've got basically 2 risers, which makes sense to me because we have 2 separate sets of limbs, right? So we have a separate riser for each set of limbs, as opposed to having one riser going across there and then something coming up and mounting those limbs to the single riser. There you got too much room for movement, whereas this way it seems to lock these limbs down a little better. That to me seems like it would increase accuracy, right? It would make those limbs more stable so that they are held more tightly. You're going to want to go through and tighten those every season, I'm betting. Tighten all those little bolts in here because there's going to be a lot of vibration on a crossbow like this. But that is shooting in a way that is going to hold those limbs solid, probably easier to replicate the shot after shot after shot. So I do like that. So that's a neat concept. I do like it. That is a small crossbow. It's not a small crossbow. It's not a small crossbow. I take that back. That's a appropriately sized crossbow, right? Me shooting the SWAT X1, one thing I have come to love is that compact crossbow. It's hard for me to shoot the big old clunker like the OB anymore, right? I have a fondness for that crossbow, just like you have a fondness for the crossbows you have used over the years, I'm betting. But nonetheless, it's really hard to argue with the fact that smaller is better, right? And that's why we're back to the smaller, faster, lighter, denser, cheaper. It's one of the things. Over time, technology allows us to reduce the size of these pieces of equipment, but still get the functionality that we would have gotten in the old school, bigger equipment, or even better functionality in the case of a lot of modern crossbows. Zero track barrel, that's neat. And we'll read up about that and find out more about that. And guide lock arrow rest. Now, I do have a feeling I know what that is. Reduces weight and eliminates arrow friction. Now, the zero track barrel, when we talk about barrels on crossbows, this is not an enclosed barrel by the looks of things, the way that the SWAT X1 has an enclosed barrel. Remember, I talked about that in just my last video. And I know this video is supposed to be about the Burris Oracle X. Well, guess what? They came out with this and I decided to postpone my Burris Oracle X video. That's older technology. It's now becoming tried, true, and tested. I love that scope and I'm going to do a video on it because people keep asking me. There's still people getting interested in those and purchasing those. And we're going to do it. We're going to do a video on it. I will do some more videos on it, but I want to cover the new stuff as soon as it comes out. So by the time you see this, it's probably going to be like January 2nd or January 3rd, but I'm trying to get these videos about the new technology out as soon as possible so we can start talking about it. And every year we start with TenPoint because they come out first. It's great. But that zero track barrel, now keep in mind, all crossbows have barrels. That is actually a piece of terminology about crossbows. If you look at the anatomy of a crossbow, it does include a barrel, but that's just you've got the forestock, the foregrip, and above that you have a barrel. And of course the rail sits on the barrel as part of the barrel. This is a zero track barrel. And I think what that means is it doesn't have any physical contact with the arrow to increase friction and reduce arrow speed. Instead, it is a zero track barrel, but it still is a barrel. It still is a piece of the crossbow that the arrow will travel along before it is ejected, before it is fired downrange. And guide lock arrow rest. Now we'll look at that. We probably got more pictures of these things. It's funny we don't have a lot of comments. Like I don't see people commenting on this, or maybe my Facebook's messed up. I don't know. Trigger tech trigger, unmatched accuracy and precision. Triggers aren't a big deal to me. The more you shoot different crossbows, the more you start to appreciate one trigger versus another. I do believe that. I don't like triggers with a lot of travel. I do love the SWAT X1 trigger. I love the Scorpid trigger that I have on my Deathstalker. I love my Excalibur triggers. They all seem to be right in the mix of the 3 pounds or so. That seems to be really good to me. From what I read, this is a 3-pound trigger, so I do like that. I did catch that in a previous thing that I looked at. It's a nice looking trigger. Everybody loves the trigger techs, so I don't have any complaints about that. I do see here, let's go back to that. This grip better be comfy because it doesn't look like you can change it out, right? There won't be any sweet 1911 modified grips on this crossbow for me, unfortunately. Here we are loading an arrow. Now this is going to be a little bit, look at the concentration. This fellow putting that arrow down in there, and you can see he's concentrating. He's looking because holy cow, you better not screw that up, right? I'm putting that arrow in there. It's already cocked. You're putting that arrow in there. And the way I look at it, now he's got his fingers behind the broadhead. He's not going to stab himself if this thing fires. And when he puts that arrow in place, you don't want it coming out the side here, or, you got to make sure it gets on that string every time. Physically, it would be neat to have one of these to see somebody do that. Maybe there's videos, but to put that arrow in place. My concern, about this, looking at this crossbow right now, is you don't have a flight groove, right? The traditional Excalibur, you get that flight groove where the one vein goes down in there and it's going to ride down that groove, right? And that helps you line the arrow up and make sure that it's knocked against the string. You don't have that. You also don't have a snap-on knock. This is TenPoint's knock system. And from what I remember, the Alpha knocks, if you get the lighted ones, the Alpha knocks, but they don't snap on. They're more of a capture style knock. The string will be here and it will go over the string. So you got to make sure it's lined up. You don't want it this way or this way, right? You got to make sure it's like this. Okay, so we get it captured on there, but it doesn't snap on and grip it like the Scorpid does. So what happens when you fire it, you're going to get a little bit of travel as that string is going down and pushing that. You might get some travel on there. If you don't have it lined up perfectly, it's going to, wobble a little bit. You can have some problems. You can have some problems with that knock style. TenPoint, in the past, over the years, there's been issues with their knocks, but these ones right now, they kind of seem to have that all solved with the crossbows that are out there and the knocks that are out there. I'm not hearing as much about them because I read all the Facebooks and the forums and all that stuff, and I haven't heard as much about that. It does come in Vector Camo or Moss Green. That's interesting. That's the camo. It's an interesting camo pattern. A little light for my taste, but that's a good looking crossbow. It really is. The smaller the crossbow gets, the less the finish becomes important because there's less to finish. There's just less crossbow. So it's kind of interesting when you look at that stuff. So that's that post. Let's X out of that. And then we're going to scroll down a little bit here. Do have a few comments. Such an incredible lineup of new bows. Thank you, Nikki Tilley. Interesting. There's only one comment? Was posted 15 hours ago, and TenPoint had, how many followers does they got? 232,000 followers on Facebook, and one comment and 5 shares. That's insane. That's nothing. How do you have that many followers, but almost nobody cares? 55 thumbs up. 55 thumbs up. Wow, that's nuts. I mean, contrast that with this, right? We'll go to Death by Bunjie real quick. I only have 5,600 followers, but I wished happy birthday to Genevieve, and that post got 396 likes and 160 comments. And that was December 30th, but that's my daughter. Isn't that funny? That's a great picture. She's out doing her traps, and my trail camera picked up this picture. I think that's just the greatest picture ever. And incidentally, yeah, she looks warm, doesn't she? She's got these giant fluffy mittens on, and she's got the world's warmest hat of all time. But this is a raccoon that she trapped last year that she made gloves and a hat out of. So she's big into trapping, right? She's a taxidermist. You can check out her page on Second Life Taxidermy. Actually, I'll show you that real quick. There are links in the description for that stuff, but here's a coyote that she did years ago for somebody. She has quite a bit going on here as far as her Facebook page is concerned. And if you click on there, she's got some videos, so you can go watch her YouTube channel. That is her YouTube channel, so go check it out. I'm gonna get rid of that. We're gonna go back to the old TenPoint's here though, but that's kind of nuts. But I don't know why maybe people just aren't interested in this stuff. I don't know. Here's a video, let's watch it. Shall we? Let's get some sound. How come there's no sound? Where do we get sound? Oh, I got sound in the headphones. Not a big fan of the music. Compact footprint. Now there we see the brush that's holding that arrow in place. That's what I was talking about before. That is that arrow rest system. You can see it is sitting on here, and I bet on the other side of this there's a little ball bearing or something, some kind of a roller of some sort that allows that arrow to roll down as it's being ejected and fired. So you got the brushes here coming down. Brushes aren't uncommon. A little bit of clearance, very little clearance on that brush. That's an interesting shot right there. What else we got? We got a nice rail. Now, let's go back to that in just a second. Is there a way for me to go back? Well, they don't make this easy, do they? Maybe we'll show that again. But the rail, if we look at this on that scope rail, okay, that's nice. I like that because remember TenPoint came out, and this is one of my criticisms of TenPoint, is that when they come out with stuff, it seems like they come out with stuff one year, and then next year, after everybody bought it, they fix problems with it. They should have been fixed in the first generation. And one of the examples of that was, remember they needed scope struts to hold that scope rail solid for some of the newer scopes, the Burris Oracle X, for example, right? That scope's pretty heavy. And if you have a cantilever design where that scope rail just sticks out like this, and you got that heavy thing on here, it's gonna wobble. A lot of vibration. It's going to loosen stuff up. No good. No good. Can't have that. In my mind, is a much better design where it's hooked up here to the twin risers up front to the top of the 2 risers. It goes back, and then it's also fixed into the stock here. This is much more stable. I really like it. I think that's powerful. I think that's a much better design. So I prefer crossbows now in the present to have that, because I want to see the ability for me to put those heavier scopes on there. As these scopes evolve, they have rangefinders built into them. They're a lot heavier. And I would like to see the ability to use that on those crossbows. Pretty neat design. I do like that video. That's pretty interesting. Here is the 26. We'll look at the TRX 26 difference here. Now look at this little monster. When we talk about smaller, faster, lighter, denser, cheaper, this one's smaller yet, 26.5 inches long, 5 3/4 inches wide, cocked, axle to axle, I'm betting, but 460 feet per second. This is now the fastest compact crossbow in the world. I think the last one last year was 460 though, so it's tied for the fastest, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it seems like last year we had another one that was 460 from TenPoint that was the smallest compact crossbow in the world. So in my book, they're all compact. Holy cow. There's a whole different world of crossbows here. That's that camo pattern I think we were talking about. That is a nice camo pattern. Here's a problem for me. And that arrow, because I think these are 20-inch arrows. The quiver shoots off to the side like this. I don't carry the quiver on the crossbow anymore. It's funny how we get smaller crossbows, the quiver becomes like the biggest thing and it becomes a pain in the neck. So I carry that actually attached to my backpack typically instead of mounting it on a crossbow. I just simply don't do it. The SWAT X1, for example, too small. The quiver's in a way no matter what you do with it, it seems like. And mounting it sideways on top, I'm not getting into that. So I just carry it on my backpack. Hasn't been a problem. So knock on wood. When we look at this one, look how he's carrying it into the woods cocked, unloaded, but carrying it into the woods cocked. He is hunting next to some really nice corn, and I'm telling you, that's the way to do it. Corn is king. Lightest and narrowest reverse draw ever. There you go. Reverse draw, good design. That's a whole different ball game. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, of course, what we have is the reverse draw technically refers to, this is both reverse draw and reverse limb. Typically, you'll see the strings on your traditional crossbows, the strings come off the cam here and pull back. This is reverse draw, meaning they come off, the string comes off the reverse. It comes off the front of the cams, so it gives you a longer power stroke. The string is drawn back even further, and you can see where it's drawn back here from the front of the cams. String goes all the way back, grabs the arrow and shoots it out. So it gives it more power stroke. There's more time for that string to travel down the rail and have contact with the arrow, and therefore increasing the amount of energy that string can impart on that arrow. That's a big deal. That's a big part of that design. One of the problems with that reverse draw design is how tight this gets. All of a sudden here, that string is drawn back and cocked, and it just goes up through here. It is very narrow, right? You've got a lot of tension around that one little point, and it can wear on your servings. But they seem to be really building strings well these days, where that's not as much of a problem. Burris Oracle X. There's my scope. There's my scope, like I was telling you. Now this one, that scope rail does come up front and mounts here on the top of that front end. So that's good. Okay, so we do have that mounted up there. I do like that. So now when we have this giant Burris Oracle X on there, which is almost, it's like half the size of the crossbow, right? That's going to increase the weight quite a bit. It's a 2-pound scope. It's just under 2 pounds. So it does increase the weight. We're talking about smaller, faster, lighter, denser, cheaper. Over time, these scopes will get smaller. They will, over time, right? This is the first generation of this. So you got to expect it to be bigger and heavier. But over time, it'll be cheaper and smaller, and it'll work better and have more features, blah, blah, blah. That's just the way, the nature of technological advancement. This is a nice looking crossbow. Not seeing it loaded. Not seeing it loaded. These are some good ones. Somebody shot a deer here, but all we get's the ear. So all we get is the ear. We don't get the antlers. If it was a really good crossbow, we'd have a big buck sitting next to it. And there it is loaded. Holy cow, look at that arrow sticking off the front end. That thing just comes out there, like sticking out there a mile. That's not good. I don't like that design. I don't like that design because you can't set it down in the blind. You're got to worry about if you're carrying it, if you're doing a spot and stalk, you're moving from one location to another, or if you're just, you're sitting in a tree stand with limited room or something, you move it around, that arrow sticking out there is going to get caught on stuff, and it happens, and I don't like that. I like to avoid that. Here we've got a reverse riser on it though too. This is not just reverse draw, right? The string coming off the front of the cams and going back like that. This is also reverse limb. The limbs, instead of coming off the front and going back, the limbs are coming off the middle here and going forward. And that, again, you make the crossbow shorter, but the power stroke, the distance that string is going to travel, is increased with that design. Pretty powerful design. I've done videos on that in the past. The Scorpion Deathstalker is my crossbow that has that kind of design. So that's pretty cool. Well, here's a video on we'll watch that. What the heck? We'll watch that video. This is what I'm talking about though. If he's going, like let's say he's moving from one stand to another and he doesn't want to take the arrow out. With the arrow in there, the arrow is going to stick up considerably and get caught on these branches. That's my complaint, right? And I know that you really probably shouldn't be carrying it that way, but if you're carrying it out in front of you safely with the arrow sticking out like that and pointed away from you and pointed away from everybody else as you're walking through the woods, it does increase the chances of the front end of that arrow getting snagged on some autumn olive or what have you, right? Wow, did you see that? Look how far that arrow, I have never seen a design like that before. Typically when they extrude past the end of the riser, extrude, is that the right word? When they extend past the end of the riser like that, typically you've got a stirrup that protects them that sticks out here. Then you feel a little more confident that at least I can lean it up against me, put the stirrup in the mud, got the arrow and the broadhead out of the mud. You don't have that protection here at all. I'm surprised they're selling you a compact crossbow like this with long arrows. Like, I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be, but I think they sell 16 inches here. But I can't imagine that sticking out that far is a 16-inch arrow. Wow, I don't know. Historically, that was a thing with crossbows and crossbow designs. You got to protect the end of that arrow. And we kind of we see multiple manufacturers kind of abandoning that as these crossbows get smaller and smaller and smaller. There are state minimums for arrow length. Usually you got to have at least 16 inches in most states, or in a lot of states, the ones that have the minimums. It seems to me that's just, we're going to see this more and more as crossbows get smaller. That's what I'm thinking. A neat design overall. That's pretty good. Let's look at the prices on these bad boys, because that's one thing we haven't looked at, and I have not seen those prices yet. New 25 crossbows. And so we've got, let's do the oh man. Oh, the prices. Oh. Yeah, that's 10-point money right there. $3,000, and that's before you get to the Oracle X. Actually, the exciting thing about this when I look at it is you can get the Oracle X here for about $600. That's pretty exciting to me. $600 Oracle X. It's almost worth buying it for that, because that way you can get the Oracle X a little bit of a discount. So that's pretty sweet. That's a good setup there, but $3,600 outside my price range. But you're shooting 460. You're in the ultra modern speeds of crossbows with hopefully a tested nock design. So you can have a little bit of faith about that, even though this is the latest and greatest category, which me personally, I like to avoid, that I talk about in my book, The Death by Bunjie Crossbow Method, that I avoid the latest and greatest, right? And I break that rule from time to time because I have a YouTube channel. I like to explore new stuff. So this crossbow, brand new this year, but we're seeing some technology from TenPoint here that's been used in other circumstances, right? We look at their crank system, pretty solid stuff, pretty time tested. We look at their the Trigger Tech trigger, that's something that's time tested. So you're buying something that's cutting edge, that's the latest and greatest, but it is tried, true, and tested. Parts of it are. So we're seeing that sort of a mix here where this is becoming more of a tried, true, and tested design. I hope. $3,000 and $3,050 for this crossbow. That's a pretty expensive thing. When we're looking at the TX28, this is 2 inches longer, but it's $2,050, a little over $2,000 for 10 feet per second. That's a lot of 10-point technology for $2,000. It really is not. If you want to do the 10-point stuff, that is, you get in the door for $2,000. More than I want to spend on a crossbow, right? But it is nonetheless, there's a lot that I like about it. You know, the scope rail is not going to need updates with scope struts or whatever they call them or any of that stuff. Here is a picture of the scope struts I'm talking about. This is something that didn't come out on their first generation. But when that scope rail goes out like this, okay, and what happens is you put a big heavy Burris Oracle X on that scope rail and you get that cantilever design that gives you that vibration at the end of it. It didn't like that, and they were having problems, I suspect. I haven't read that. I haven't talked to anybody from TenPoint. I want to be clear about that. But this design right here, this sort of a rector set looking thing, it goes on here, and that is what holds that scope rail from vibrating, reduces that vibration, and holds it in place so it doesn't wreck the crossbow. I suspect they had some problems with it, issues with it, and that's why they had to issue a new generation of those with it. My complaint is you can't retrofit them. You can't take that scope strut and put it on older 10-points that didn't have that. So that's a problem too. Like, I don't like that. I don't like it when companies put out these products and kind of make you and me be the test subjects for it, right? I like them to have a tested design and sell you that. And that's why I like to not buy the latest and greatest. I'm not being critical necessarily of 10-point on that. People are going to be saying, oh, why are you reviewing the expensive crossbows and you don't look at the cheaper ones? I get that. Well, I do look at the cheaper ones, okay? This month, in the next couple of months, we're going to be looking at a wide variety of crossbows. I make an effort to do that every year. The newer technology eventually gets to all of us, though, okay? $3,000 10-point technology will be eventually available to us who buy $1,000 crossbows and even cheaper crossbows, right? That speed, years ago, we weren't talking about 460 feet per second at all. But someday we'll be talking about 460 feet per second for $400 at Walmart. And that's what we'll be talking about. And that's goes back to that conversation about smaller, faster, lighter, denser, cheaper, right? Those different things are what we see in this technology. That's why I look at these. But I do have some other ones too. And I want to be clear about that. I do have some other ones I'm going to be looking at. We're going to look at a couple of other brands, other manufacturers that we haven't looked at in the past, incoming videos. I hope you got something out of this. Leave me some comments. Tell me what you think about these new crossbows from TenPoint. And until next time, all hail Bunjie. Perfect length of a video. I'm all out of my iced coffee.